Welcome to this evening. Another deep dive. Yeah, sometimes with linear time or in relationship to planet Earth, there's this idea that as time moves along, that civilization advances. Although there are quite a lot of people, as I've traveled around the world and met people in 44 countries, they're not so sure that the planet is advancing or civilization is advancing. They're not so sure if things are getting better or worse. And in human history, we have had eras where, like with Atlantis, some of you have heard of Atlantis and the Mancha, and there have been the very elevated high societies or cultures that were here for a while and then they perished. Very high states of mind as far as groups go. But last year, Apple TV came up with this series called Pluribus, meaning plur one BS. One BS. That basically all of us on Earth are really one being, and we've forgotten that we're just one being, and so it seems to take on multiple little personalities, consciousness, as each person and each animal and each plant have bits of consciousness, and yet actually that's just a deception. That's a projection of the one belief in separation from the ego. So pluribus or plur one be us. We can leave the plur part off. It's one be us. It's really one mind, and one mind, it seems to overtake Earth pretty quickly, and not kind of or mostly overtake Earth. It almost completely takes over the planet. And so oneness is the norm, and then there's some dissenters that we have. Is it seven, 8 people, 13 people that are like not in that state of oneness. So pluribus for us last year became a great teaching device, because there's a lot of references in A Course in Miracles to this oneness. There's one that I particularly enjoy from chapter 1, section 6. As you integrate, you become one, and your needs become one accordingly. That's kind of, with seemingly so many different needs, levels of needs, hierarchies of needs for the human being. As you integrate, you become one, and your needs become one accordingly. Unified needs lead to unified action, because this produces a lack of conflict. So I was sharing earlier, what you do comes from what you think. And as your thinking lines up with God, via the Holy Spirit and the Christ mind, then unified needs lead to unified action. And so it's, in one sense, if one mind is shared, then it's like there can be many, many bodies, and yet the bodies are simply vehicles that the one mind is using. And when you have this on a mass scale, it makes for kind of a unique teaching device, with 13 of those bodies that are not connected to the oneness, and the rest of the 8.4 billion are. So the ego, in this sense, is in the minority, in the great, vast minority. But it also makes for a very good teaching movie. This was actually another series that was edited together to give us, like, instead of a series ranging over a number of weeks, it's basically been edited down to like 2 hours and 6 minutes. So So we're going to have the whole pluribus experience tonight with some commentary as we go through. And it's interesting that in chapter 8, Jesus mentions the Bible. This is a nice summation of the Bible. The Bible enjoins you to be perfect, to heal all errors, to take no thought of the body as separate, and to accomplish all things in my name. This is not my name alone, for ours is a shared identification. The name of God's Son is one, and you are enjoined to do the works of love because we share this oneness. Our minds are whole because they are one. You who have played that you are lost to hope, abandoned by your Father, left alone in terror in a fearful world made mad by sin and guilt, be happy now. The game is over. Now a quiet time has come in which we put away the toys of guilt and lock our quaint and childish thoughts of sin forever from the pure and holy minds of heaven's children and the Son of God. So I think we have always rejoiced in symbols of oneness, but with such a large-scale symbol of oneness, it really highlights where there is a rebellion to that oneness, or where there is an attempt to block that oneness. We can see the error more clearly in contrast to this vast expression of oneness. No ownership, no hierarchies, no change of command, no commander-in-chief, unless you consider the one is the commander-in-chief, be Christ-like, and the one is commander-in-chief, and all the bodies are simply following being sourced, being expressed through by this oneness. But it brings up a good contrasting experience to the human condition. And in some ways, what we have is in our community, it's evolved over many, many years, but there's such a flow. Prayer is so much of the focus that in many ways it has for us been a pluribus experience where there's such agreement. We don't have to rely on things like democratic vote for people say, how does your community work? Do you ever vote on things? And we're like, vote? It's very telepathic. It's like a song. It's like a rhythm. It's like a daily devotion where there's a flow, and then when we even come to pray together, it's very much like group prayer, where there's a lot of laughter and a lot of nodding heads, as if you're receiving the same thing, often at the same time, and that's a very strong witness to the power of the one and the power of prayer. So it's not like the idea of individual choice. It's more like there's a presence that comes through and comes through with the guidance, and then the more you fine-tune this, seemingly with devotion over many years, then it's very much like a choir or a chorus, all singing the tune in tune, and there's a harmony with that. There's a feel of harmony where there's not this thing of constantly dealing with disagreement, constantly dealing with dissenter, where you have 7 people that are all like, yeah, I feel it, and someone's go, no way. It's because the undoing of the ego belief system is the undoing of opinions and the undoing of false conclusions. So in one sense, there's like a synergy with the flow of things and the movement of things, almost like some of you You might know of the Amish in the eastern part of the United States, where they do these barn raisings, where they just come together and in one day they raise up and build a big barn. And for most people, they're like, how in the world do you build a barn in one day? It takes many working together in harmony and unison to do that. And there's a feeling with that, like there's such a synergy where things are just flowing and getting handled. And also there's just such a high degree of communication. And so you can experience this in pluribus. There's like a high degree of communication, but it's also, there's less use for words because it's more telepathic communication. And Jesus is teaching us that words are very crude. They're symbols of symbols twice removed from reality. So as you move more to a unified mind, there's less and less need for the words. Although I find it with our community is still lots of use of words. We've used a lot of technology, and this was just in the past year we've kind of adopted Google Workspace. We've been adopting more and more AI things, and things just seem to get easier and easier and easier as we are very organized and the channels of communication are wide open. So people are thinking the same thoughts with the Holy Spirit, and then it's reflected even in our use of Google Workspace, where it's just like a time saver. And we even have little boards, what's it called, where you share your miracles? Ring the gong. There's so many gong ringings during the day. Ring the gong, another miracle, another miracle. It's like ding, ding, ding. That's why I don't leave the sound on my phone, because ring the gong, messages, updates, all kinds of things in a whole range of things that makes it very simple and streamlined, not a complex kind of, let's get together and have a powwow and figure this out. It's just like ding, 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 ding. It's meant to be a telepathic flow. When you serve the same purpose, if you all serve the same purpose, then that streamlines and simplifies everything, including communication. So in this movie, we'll see things like the demonstration of the one mind and this telepathic flow experience. And they're going to be calling this, the one will call this sweeping conversion to oneness on planet Earth, the greatest day in the history of humanity. And it's hard for the one to describe it. They say it's not really a virus. It's more like a source code overtaking the human race. The source code is a movie we have in our collection, but imagine the source code overtaking the human race with some very, very tiny limited resistance. And they say things like there's a quicker way if you're open to it. That's pretty obvious. Also, what we consider defense mechanisms and protectionism, for those 13, is it 13 that are still dissenting, we hear the message coming through from the one, we can't protect you from one another. Isn't that delightful? It's like the oneness is not going to try to intervene. The oneness is not into false empathy. We can't protect you from one another. It's like a little suggestion and maybe a little warning to the 13. We can't protect you from one another. And of course, we can see on the planet that we've inhabited, the problem is the people can't protect themselves from one another, even though they've tried to use military and all type of defensive maneuvers. it's like an impossible situation. Attack and defense is literally an impossible situation. They also say things like, we've been you, but you have never been us. So joining goes in one direction. And that means that if we see the world from true empathy, we see and experience the one as reality, and there's no room for anything else. Jesus would call it a call for love. If there's something that seems to be resisting or dissenting against the one, it's just a call for love. See if there's... Your mind is one with God's. Denying this and thinking otherwise has held your ego together, but has literally split your mind. Each of us is the light of the world, and by joining our minds in this light, we proclaim the kingdom of God together and as one. God wills you perfect happiness now. Is it possible that this is not also your will? And is it possible that this is not also the will of your brothers? Consider then that in this joint will you are all united, and in this only. So I think we're just going to enjoy it. I find that this whole series has been just absolutely delightful. I think for myself and for the community, it's such a strong sense of recognition that it's like giving a strong glimpse of what is possible. I mean, throughout human history, we have had a lot of writers that will write books about, they call it utopia. But utopia usually seems to have a lot of physical components to it, and the oneness we're learning, the one mind, doesn't really have physical components to it. It's a state of mind, and we might call it a purpose that can use the body and use the world and use the symbols that the ego made, but it is not limited in any way by those symbols. So you're not going to be seeing a lot of false empathy that Jesus talks about. This Pluribus series is a strong demonstration of what is called true empathy. Stay with what's real, stay with what's true. Also, the invitation to oneness is always there. You can feel it's always present, whether the one is saying, come join us, or the one is simply carrying on when a bottle of water is offered on a hot day and it's swatted aside or thrown down. The one doesn't have any investment in the gift being accepted, but it doesn't stop the one from offering and extending the gift, and extending the invitation. In its own way, the one is saying, join us. In its own way, the one is saying, it's inevitable. Oneness is inevitable. You can join me now or join me later, but you're going to join me because we are one. And in Pluribus, it's so predominant. It's just the whole world has gone into the oneness, except for the 13 dissenters. And so it's kind of interesting. One of the dissenters we'll focus on is Carol. So Carol is quite an interesting character, but Carol will stand out in this series and in this mini-movie because she is absolutely determined to perceive the oneness as some kind of an invasion on Earth. And when this series came out, I was seeing all kinds of things on YouTube where they're all getting together to meet and join and rejoice together in Carol fighting against the invader. They're seeing the source code as the invader that has invaded the Earth and taken over the Earth. It's interesting how it twists. You've even got a T-shirt that you're wearing. Maybe you could stand up and show. This is a T-shirt of Zosha offering Carol a bottle of water as she's sweating and digging a grave for her close friend, who's her agent. And what's it say? Drink of me. Offering a bottle of water with a smile to a hungry, thirsty soul who's in need of having her thirst quenched. So it's beautiful. Zosha is a beautiful character, and it's interesting with the one too, because the one is a presence that's beyond the body, but it seems like when Carol, since she's connected, she's part of the one, even though she's not aware that she's a part of the one, and she's part of the one, meaning her mind is very powerful as well. When she has her anger fits and her temper tantrums, it seems to have the effect of some destructive force, because Jesus is saying, you think your thoughts don't have any power, but actually they have enormous power, and that he says you're actually afraid of your thoughts because you're afraid of miscreation. You're afraid of your thoughts being used in destructive ways. And so that's why you're afraid of your thoughts. And then he does talk in the Course in lessons like I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts. He's basically saying, he's starting to introduce oneness, but he's saying you're apt to perceive the oneness as an invasion of privacy. And also you're apt to be very frightened of the oneness because you don't want to recognize the power of your thoughts. He's saying you have no idle thoughts. What gives rise to a whole world can hardly be called idle. Idle thoughts. I-D-L-E, not I-D-O-L. Idle thoughts. It's like, oh, it's just these crazy thoughts in my mind. Jesus is like, well, actually, those aren't idle thoughts. That's what's producing war. That's what's producing plagues or disease. That's what's producing the world that you see. And so that's why he's calling us to go through a purification process. And Pluribus is kind of showing us closer to the end result of practicing the Course in Miracles to the full extent. And you can also see, because of the 13 resistors, you can see that the resistance of the ego to this oneness is enormous. Even though there's 13 out of the 8.4 billion, those 13 have a range of, you can only imagine if you had 13 resistors, a range from very suspicious, very angry, and very doubtful to, oh, I can use the power of the one to my advantage and become the absolute epitome of the manifester. Using it for the power of manifestation for personal gain. So that's the range from the anger and the doubt and the resistance to using it still to maintain an ego identity, but using the world in that way. I saw that it popped up there. So that's our sign. We're going to start. So you can see the oneness has taken over pretty much all of Earth, except for these 11, starting off with 11 here. And we can see that when Carol starts really expressing her anger, shoving Zosha and then screaming at her, Jesus is teaching us in the Course, my thoughts are images I have made, and sickness is the attempt to make someone else feel guilty, and that basically her anger is being projected out into the world, onto the screen of the world, and I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thought. Attack thoughts draw forth witnesses. So in this sense, when Carol ultimately she's part of the one, but she denies it. But those attack thoughts do get reflected in the world, and all of us know that with the bodily symptoms. These are just attack thoughts projected onto the body. And the point of the Course is to release all attack thoughts, which is workbook lesson number 23. I can escape from the world I see by giving up attack thoughts. I can escape from the fragmented perceptual world I see by giving up attack thoughts. If I give up attack thoughts, I'll see the world with a whole mind, and I'll see the world from a holistic perspective where it's a unified awareness. So I'm not going to make distinctions between bodies, places, things. There's no sick or well in the real world. It's just the whole mind perceiving a reflection of light, And Jesus does say the body's eyes will continue to report differences, but the healed mind has put them into one category. They are unreal. Without judgment, you see that is what the healing of the mind is. It's only the attack thoughts, the categorizing, the judging, the breaking apart mechanism, the ego, that makes up a fragmented perceptual world. But the goal of the Course is the happy dream, or the unified perception of the world. That's why it's called a happy dream. It's a world without judgment. It's a world perceived without judgment. It still is a world, but there's no judgment placed on the world. So that's like Jesus saying, without judgment, all things are equally acceptable. That's the way we can understand it. Without judgment, all things are equally acceptable. Nothing is rejected. Everything is equally acceptable, but also all the differences and distinctions, disappear. So it's interesting at the beginning here, because they're saying it's the greatest, one is saying it's the greatest day in human history. It's been pretty much a source code takeover of the world, except for 11 people spread out across the world. And the one is saying, bear with us, there's a lot to clean up. That such a shift, such a radical, we'll call it a cosmic shift from fragmentation to oneness, has left millions of dead people. That's why they're cleaning up the bodies. The bodies, could just say, did they die? That's a human word, dead body. It's more like the one only uses what it needs to use in the plan, and so therefore the ones that seem to die are the ones that are unnecessary to the plan. Just like if you did time-lapse photography of all of human history, you would see lots of bodies being born, right, every day, and bodies deceasing every day. Some entering and some seeming to cease to be active. And so if you watched it on time-lapse photography, there'd be the comers and the goers. And then over history, the population explosion, many more comers, many more goers. Very dispassionate. It's like to the one, nothing is personal. So it's just like what still serves remains in your perception, and what doesn't serve, what no longer serves, disappears from perception. From the human perspective, it's called birth and death, but those are just concepts too. What is one can't really be born, and what is one can't really die. So the appearances don't affect the oneness at all. It's just what serves and what doesn't serve. So the one is basically saying, bear with us, Carol, over the coming days. We have a lot of cleanup to do. It's just cleaning up the bodies. They're not doing like burial rituals like she was doing it, obviously, with her agent friend. She's a writer, an author, and her friend Helen was her agent, and so she was digging a grave to bury Helen because that's a custom in some cultures, not necessarily in India. They tend to burn people as part of cremation. In some cultures, there's different ways of handling the bodies, but this is a ritual on Earth of burying a dead body. That's what she's going through with her close friend and her agent. And you can see with Zosha, she comes very friendly, offering the water, the Aquafina water, and then Carol pours it out, and basically Zosha picks up the empty bottle and puts the lid back on and says, if you have water in your house, please drink water. We don't want you dehydrated. The wish is for evolution. The wish is for remembering the one and anything that can be helpful. Even Carol is very much like a female version of Raban, which was the main character in one of Carol's books. And so the one is just trying to appear in forms that are recognizable, that could be conducive to waking up. So it's just appearing in forms that are relatively helpful because they're relatable. Just like we might say A Course in Miracles came in the form of a book, and books tend to be read by human beings, and it's a symbol of a means or a pathway for spiritual awakening. But the book is just a symbol. But the awakening must occur in the mind that's asleep and dreaming. So, yeah, we can see that even with Zosha, we see her very dirty and walking along, helping to try to pull a body out of a car, and then flying an airplane. She walks in after there's no big deal about flying a plane. Is she a pilot? The roles are not so important anymore because the one contains all the roles. So the one is capable of using a body for anything, be it a medical doctor or being a postman, be it a pilot to fly a plane. It's just that the symbols get used by the purpose. And that's a real important thing here, because that's what you experience when you really start to tune into the Holy Spirit. You start to realize that the idea of the roles, or people being tied into specific roles, it is not what it seems to be. It's the mind that believes in these categories. It's the mind that believes in these roles. But it's also this mind that is encouraging a false identity or a self-concept that's like a package of roles. Like with Danny, you took the mom package, the husband package, and the spiritual MC package. And you see her, she comes in, she leads you in, and it's like a game show host, but in a spiritual context. All of us are blessed by that. But it's just a role. And to the one, the roles are not the identity. It's just the one uses the bodies, uses the symbols of the world in a way that can be conducive and helpful for the mind to recognize that oneness. It's very simple when you think of it that way. So there's not a categorization, would be like Danny is taken over by the one. She would say, this individual's name is Daniela Lopez. But really it's just us. It's just the one. It takes it away from a personality identification, because there's only the one, and everything being used by the one to remember or to recognize the one. And it's that simple. Are there special aspects of the one? No, it's just us. In fact, the first character says, no, it's just us. Just us. Who is us? the one. And in that sense, what Jesus is teaching us is he's saying everyone is the Christ. Whether they seem to know it or they're aware of it or not doesn't change the fact. And that one, which maybe Eckhart Tolle might call presence, presence is behind everything. Whether you recognize the presence or not, presence is behind everything. There actually are no individual identities. That's part of the illusion. And then even the concept of reincarnation, or some of you might know we have a movie in our Movie Watcher's Guide called Chances Are, where Robert Downey Jr. is like the reincarnation of this man named Louis, but he's trying to figure out what's going on. So he goes into a psychic, spiritual bookstore, and then the woman says, "We've all been here before. We're all born again and again and again." And the woman says, "You're not Cleopatra. I was." So it's, you see, there's still the identification with past lives even. And Jesus says in the Course, he's asked the question, is reincarnation so? And he says anything that's used to strengthen your awareness of the eternal life is basically helpful. But nothing has any purpose other than helping the mind remember the eternal nature of life. Not of the body, but of spirit. So everything is just moves in that one direction of remembering the one. And from that perspective, there's really no such thing as gain or loss. It's like she's upset because her friend and an agent, Helen, has died, but she's just already been told no. So she says, no, before she died, she joined us. She's like, no, she didn't. She doesn't want to even think of that as a possibility because she's very resistant to the idea. For her, it's more like she perceives it as an alien invasion. But I think as you go along, you'll just see how Zosha's like pulling a body out of a car, driving a motor scooter, flying a plane, getting showered and cleaned up, and then visiting with an Aquafina water. You can see it's just all in the function, in the service of the one, but there's no sense of a personal, individual identity. So in that sense, this show is like really, it's an amazing miracle for all of us to have a reflection like this, because it kind of gives you a little, like a futuristic glimpse of living a life where you don't have to have so much weight on personal responsibility, whether it's academically, having to achieve something, or where am I going to fit into society, what life goals do I have of relationship or family or whatever. It depersonalizes everything, and to the ego that is freaking fearful, because it is all about personalizing everything and individualizing everything and making everything personal. And the one doesn't see the person at all. It's in this flow. Like everybody's just about the business of the one, and they still can respond to individual names, even though it's kind of like almost like a joke, like it's just us, it's just the one. Even appearances aside, this individual goes by this name, but it's just us, it's just the one. And how relaxing that is, because there's, you see where that eliminates guilt, that eliminates all sense of embarrassment. They're not operating out of a system of private minds and private thoughts. They're just operating from the one. And you can see to the mind that believes that it's private, which is, you can see the concern on Carol's face. It seems like, definitely like an invasion of privacy. Are you watching me? Oh yeah, there's a drone 40,000 feet in the air. You can't see it, but it's there. Are you watching me? Are you listening to me? Are you reading my mind? No, we're not reading your mind. It's like the one doesn't need to read minds, because the one is the one. The one is aware of you might say, all minds. So it's not like it's reading an individual mind. It's just awareness. It's a very expansive awareness. So those are beautiful, like, symbols, use of symbols, and it just continues on. It just is absolutely amazing as we go through here. So earlier, Zosha said, we can't choose for you. And obviously, she said, just bring me a hand grenade. And Zosha was saying, are you being sarcastic? So you can see that the mind draws forth everything, every experience, and the one can but offer an example. You know, there's a prayer that Jesus has early in the text. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent him who sent me. I don't have to worry about what to say or do, for he who sent me will direct me. I'm content to be wherever he wishes, knowing he goes there with me, and I will be healed as he let him teach me to heal. So you can see the one, in being truly helpful, is trying to present itself to Carol in a way like the form of Zosha, the one felt would be more acceptable, and that Carol would be more drawn. It would be more of a soft symbol, and everything that is presented in terms of a demonstration coming from the one, transmitting from the one, and in a way to be spiritually attractive. And yet, you can see with Carol, she's just interpreting everything. You people are brainwashed, as if something's being taken away from her. That's because of the getting mechanism and the belief in sacrifice. So even when Carol's sarcastic, like, bring me a hand grenade, she's still, that's her thought. Bring me a hand grenade. And when she does come, she says, you people wouldn't actually bring me a live hand grenade, but this is a world of wish fulfillment. So, people have said that to be about prayer, like, be careful what you pray for, you just might get it. It's the same thing with wishes, be careful what you wish for. And this world is a dream world, but it's also wish fulfillment for the mind that's asleep and dreaming. So it's very interesting, because you can see the true empathy is not getting perturbed or upset by her and speaking up, even though when she said, was anyone hurt? And you can see Zosha say a few, and then Carol goes, a few what? A few dozen, a few hundred, and Zosha's not answering her, because like the correct answer was a few million. But just Carol, after she says a few dozen, a few thousand, or a few hundred, then she starts to throw up, because of this idea of that her thoughts are killing people. And it's definitely a stretch from the human perception, because if you ask human beings, well, there's wars going on in different parts of the world, and there are people being killed every day. But the belief is so strong in private minds and private thoughts that the mind is not allowing into awareness that my thoughts are images I have made, that you look within, and whatever you feel within is what is being pictorially represented in the world. Because that's just too overwhelming for the mind that's asleep and dreaming and believes that it has a private thoughts with private minds. It It doesn't see a connection between what's on the news and what it believes are the idle thoughts that are moving through the mind. It sees no connection between idle thoughts and what's on the news. And what Jesus is helping us see is there's actually a direct connection. In fact, he's teaching us the mind is extremely powerful. I've got a quote in here talking about the power of the mind, that it never sleeps. It's extremely powerful. Few appreciate the real power of the mind, and no one remains fully aware of it all the time. However, if you hope to spare yourself from fear, there are some things you must realize, and realize fully. The mind is very powerful and never loses its creative forces. It never sleeps. Every instant it is creating. It is hard to recognize that thought and belief combine into a power surge that can literally move mountains. It appears at first glance that to believe such power about yourself is arrogant, but that is not the real reason you do not believe it. You prefer to believe that your thoughts cannot exert real influence because you are actually afraid of them. So that's where this level of mind, these circles come in that Jason was talking about, levelsofmind.com, these diagrams and these things that I was given from Jesus. Because what Jesus is saying is, you can believe things about your thoughts, because belief is it's more inward toward the center. And whatever is in the center is desire, and everything, causation, proceeds outward from desire. What you desire, you believe. If you desire to have a split mind, then you believe in two thought systems. One is the Holy Spirit's, and one is the ego's. And then you can believe things about your thoughts. And that's a perfect example of it there. You prefer to believe that your thoughts cannot exert real influence because you are actually afraid of them. You can believe that your thoughts are ineffectual. You believe that you can believe you have idle thoughts. It's like, oh, it's just my idle thoughts. It has nothing really to do with the world or the cosmos. And what Jesus is teaching us through the mind training is that every thought you think about this world contributes to form, produces form at some level. So everything that is perceived is in the world. Everything is thought about, and of course there are ego thoughts, private thoughts, but it's thought about, and under that it's believed in. So that's why Jesus is saying you have no private thoughts, even though that's all you're aware of. And he's teaching us to go for the holy instant, which is to transcend the belief in private minds and private thoughts, to come to the actual state of experience that there's only one mind. And he says in the Course, mind reaches to itself. It does not go out. He says the body is a limit imposed on the universal communication that is an eternal property of the mind. But the communication is internal. Mind reaches to itself. It is not made up of different parts which reach each other. It does not go out. Within itself, it has no limits, and there is nothing outside it. It encompasses everything. It encompasses you entirely, you within it, and it within you. There is nothing else anywhere or ever. So he's teaching us, like he says in lesson 152, that everything that you perceive in this world is a thought in your mind. Like Vladimir Putin is a thought in the mind. And he's teaching us that all thoughts, whether it's thinking about electrons or Vladimir Putin or the solar system or a mountain or a cloud or a song or any other person on Earth or any person that's an astronaut in space. Everything that you think you see. That's how perception works. It's, projection makes perception. So my thoughts are images I have made. You think them, and therefore you think you see them. And that's why you don't think of people as thoughts. Because you think that people are people. See? It can't be both ways. Jesus is saying, no, people are thoughts. So if you have issues with people, if you have grievances with people, if you believe there's people that are holding you back in your life, if you believe you have people who are part of the government of the country that you live in, and you like or dislike those government officials, the world is exactly as you wish it to be, because the world is made up of thoughts. He's teaching us through the mind training of the Course in Miracles. He goes back and forth between thoughts and perception, thoughts, perception, and then he starts to make the connection, which is my thoughts are images that I have made. He's teaching us that the world that seems to be external to us, including the body and everything that surrounds the body in that world and cosmos, they're all thoughts. There is nothing apart from the mind. It's a perceptual hallucination. If you don't like something about the world, Jesus says, then stop thinking about it. He carefully starts out in lesson number 1. Nothing I see means anything. What do you mean nothing I see means anything? Nothing I see means anything? Why? Why does nothing I see mean anything? Well, I have given everything I see all the meaning it has for me. Oh, he's saying it doesn't mean anything because it's make-believe. It's fiction. You made it up. God didn't create it. You made it up. You made this world up. That's the later lesson. I have invented the world I see. And he's saying you can't understand it either. You don't know what anything's for. You're never upset for the reason you think. You're upset because you see something that's not there. You see only the past. Your mind's preoccupied with past thoughts. Those thoughts that your mind's preoccupied, those past thoughts, are images. My thoughts are images I have made. There's no difference between a thought and an image. This is a cup. Is it a cup? No. It's a thought. Yes.
Because what you said comports with quantum physics for those who are still, science-minded and all that. Because everything is just a quantum possibility until the observer collapses the possibility, the quantum wave, into a particle, which is a thought. Cup, Trump, Putin, viruses. So it's interesting how it all works together in that way.
They're all potentialities, they're all possibilities, but they don't collapse down into anything until you observe them as if they're real. There was a quantum physicist. I remember when I was first starting to study the Course, I was reading quantum physics books, and then I was reading this quantum physicist who lived in Australia, and his name was Paul Davis. So I'm reading his book, and at some point in the book, he has a sentence. That's an exact sentence that Jesus has in A Course in Miracles. And this is a quantum physicist. I'm reading like Paul Davis, and I'm like, and it's not just like an everyday sentence. The sentence is, there is no world. This was what the quantum physicist was saying, like from along the lines you're talking, and this is what Jesus says in lesson 132. Jesus puts an exclamation point behind it, just in case you think he's being like sarcastic or tongue-in-cheek. It's like, oh. I mean, when I was at my little peace house in Cincinnati, my friend Resta was taking down all these songs, 270 songs, channeled songs from the angels, and she was reading the course, and she was taking my, at that point, cassette tapes. It was way back, in her Walkman, or the early Walkman, and listening, going on long walks and listening to talks that I was giving. But one day she came in, and I said, I'll fix you up some tea. Let's have a cup of tea in the kitchen. And she sat down at the table, and she was very distraught. I could tell she was very upset. She was angry. I said, are you okay? And she said, he's done it. He's done it. And I said, who did it? Jesus. What did Jesus do? He's gone too far. I said, how did Jesus go too far? I'm listening. I read the lesson of the day, lesson 132, and he says in the lesson, there is no world, exclamation point. And she said, he's done it. He's flipped out. He's gone too far. He said, then she said, now she's like, Carol, how helpful is that? Really, practically speaking, how helpful? Is this supposed to be helpful to me? How helpful is that? Really, she's like really upset. And she said, what could I possibly get out of that? Where is the helpfulness of that? It's terrible. What's people just throw the book away? I see a statement like that and an exclamation point behind it. I said, well, what he's saying is he's asking you to live as if there is no world. She said, what does that mean? Live as if there's no world. And I said, imagine you just lived totally in your intuition. And you were so lined up with your intuition. You were like living in your heart all the time. You were just living in your innermost being. And you were living from that. Like if you got guidance, you follow the guidance. But you don't have to react and respond as if the external world is causing you to do something. Nobody forced you to read that lesson. You read it because you wanted to read it. And then you reacted to it because you had a judgment of that. He's gone too far this time. And so I told her about Paul Davies that day, and I said, you have to live as if there is no world. You have to live entirely internally, an entirely a guided life, an inspired guided life, as if there is no external world. And then she went into the bathroom, and the angels gave her many, many stanzas of a new song, and the title of the song was As If. And that was like for her a demonstration of her intuition drawing forth something that was practical.
You don't understand, you don't believe how powerful we are. We don't believe that we really actually stand before the Big Bang. We don't believe it, and all it requires is no skill, nothing is required except absolute belief in that statement that we do stand, our minds stand before the Big Bang, before the creation of the universe. And the problem is that we just don't believe it. It's a shortage of faith, really. It's a shortage of faith.
It's the belief, for example, very simply, that there's an inner and an outer.
That's right.
So if you believe that there's an inner and an outer, then you will act as if there is an inner and outer.
Again,
a subject and an object.
Just like Neo did in the Matrix. Until he believed there's an external reality, he could not embrace his own power. And So he kept believing and believing that there's an outside world, there's agents. And once he thought, wait a minute, I have a choice here. I can take it back, right? Take it back.
Yeah. As a human being,
Yeah.
he's saying to Morpheus, you're telling me that I'll be able to dodge bullets.
That's right.
And Morpheus says, no. I'm saying,
That's right.
when you realize who you are, you won't have to.
Exactly.
You won't have to dodge. The one doesn't dodge bullets because there are no bullets, external burn. There's nothing external to the mind. So this is the mind training. When we all talk about mind training of A Course in Miracles, it's really quite simple. He's basically saying he's going to go from the first lesson, which is perception. Nothing I see means anything. The second lesson, I get everything I see, all the meaning it has for me. That's perception. Third lesson, I do not know what anything is for. That's perception. And then what's he doing in the fourth lesson? These thoughts do not mean anything. He's thrown 3 perception lessons to start the course off. 1, 2, 3. And now in lesson 4, he's suddenly speaking about thinking. And then he goes on with more perception lessons. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All perception lessons. And guess what number 10 is? My thoughts do not mean anything. You see, he's sprinkling in thought lessons with perception lessons, mostly perception lessons, because he realizes that this perceptual world does seem to hold a reality. The mind believes it's real. It doesn't doubt. It doesn't doubt that a cloud is a cloud, a mountain is a mountain, a person is a person, a person with a name is that person with a name. It's accepted that as the dream as reality. But the dream isn't eternal. The dream is make-believe, it's fiction. So he goes back and forth, and then he goes into my thoughts or images I've made. As soon as he does a lesson like that, my thoughts are images I have made, he now is talking about cognition, thinking, and perception in the same lesson. You see, he carefully goes perception, 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 thought. Perception, 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 all the way up to 10 thought. Then he's going to make the connection between the thoughts. My thoughts are images I have made. You think you see them because you think them. But you doubt that they're just thoughts because you think, no, this is actually a cup. You see, it's not a thought, a cup thought. Originally when I was traveling with Kirsten in Florida, we were taking one of our first trips, and we were down in Florida, and we were in a little Toyota, red Toyota, and the air conditioning went out. And so, it's in her book, I Married a Mystic. The air conditioning goes out, and so she starts sweating, and she's just in the front seat like, oh, I can't take it. She was a hot, humid day, and she just was going, can't take it. And I said, oh, you're having hot thoughts. And her head snapped. What did you say? I said, you're having hot thoughts. She's like, she was just almost in disbelief. Because she was like seeing that it was actually hot. And I said, you're having hot thoughts. Which was bringing it back to everything is our thoughts. Our thoughts are determining our perception of temperature, of everything, size, shape, everything. Everything we feel in the body is not in the body. These are thoughts. Everything is thoughts. It's 100% thoughts. And then Jesus will say, these are not your real thoughts, because your real thoughts are the thoughts you think with God. And then people say, do I have any real thoughts? Or do I really have real thoughts? Have I ever had a real thought? And Jesus is introducing them in the Course. For example, I am as God created me. is a perfect real thought, because there is no perception to that thought. There is no perception to I am as God created me. I am as God created me is actually a real thought. And he says it's covered over by all these unreal thoughts, which are attack thoughts. That's why he said, judge not. That's why he said, grievances hide the light of the world in me. Grievances are an attack upon God's plan for salvation. He's teaching us in lesson 23, I can escape from the world I see by giving up attack thoughts. There it is. That's another way of saying judge not. I can escape from the world I see by giving up attack thoughts. So he's saying, you need to train your mind, just like the meditators and the mystics and the yogis of old. Empty your mind of everything you think. Literally, not figuratively or metaphorically, literally. Empty your mind of every thought that you think. And as your mind training progresses, you will be able to prevent attack thoughts from entering your holy mind. You can reach a state of mind where you're just like, sorry, off limits. Not interested in private thoughts. Not interested in ego thoughts. You can go through such a purification process that you do not, with the strength of mind, allow attack thoughts to enter. Which of course is what forgiveness is. That shows, we're talking about how powerful the mind is. Well, if it's powerful enough to think up a time-space cosmos, it must also be powerful enough to let it go, right? If it could think it up, it must be powerful enough to let it go. And that's what the mind training of A Course in Miracles is. And then you have those moments where you go deeper and deeper into meditation and the stillness, where you do lose awareness of the body. Because that's just a thought, too. That's an interesting one. Put it together. Suck up the whole universe, and what are you telling us?
Where are the hand grenades when you need them? I used to say that all the time.
Yeah. So we're just watching Carol, because the dialogue between Carol and Zosha is kind of like the dialogue between the Holy Spirit and the ego. You know, the ego is upset. It's sarcastic, it's angry, it's blaming. You can see it's just a litany, distrust, suspicion, fear, doubt. You know, it's just boom, 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 boom. And then Zosha's there, and even about the teaching about attack thoughts, you know, she's like teaching that when you direct your anger particularly right at us, sometimes it's a little hard to take as her body crumples down to the ground. You know, that's like, it's a little hard to take, that screaming, shoving me and screaming at me. But it's starting to teach her that your thoughts have power. Thoughts are not strong or weak. Thoughts are real or unreal. You see the distinction between strong and weak? That Jesus is saying they're not strong or weak, they're real or they're unreal, but they're powerful. And if you believe unreal thoughts, then you will seem to perceive a world that is external to you, but it's not. It's just your thoughts have taken a form. They're thought forms. And God did not create thought forms. God creates His Spirit. God creates pure light. Light extends light extends light. Just like in the Bible, remember all the stuff in the Old Testament, begat, begat, begat? I'm like, what is this word? As a kid, I was like, what is this begat word? What is going on? And my parents were like, that's procreation. Begat, begat. I said, that's a big word. What's procreation? It's the birds and the bees. You know, it's like, What? What's the birth and the days? You're curious about these things. Begat, begat, begat. But what Jesus is saying is, when you think thoughts that God did not create, those thoughts appear as images, as forms. But remember, those are thought forms, and God doesn't create thought forms. God is pure light. Christ is pure light. God creates in pure light. Just like in this world we get, children from parents, in heaven it's beings of light come from beings of light, or light comes from light. So that's what creation is. Light extending light, extending light. God is light. God extends light. Christ is light. And then Christ, it says, has creations too, that they're waiting for us. We won't know our creations because they have nothing to do with form. But our creations, our spiritual creations, are waiting for us in heaven, in that state of mind. So we do have creative ability as spirit, but that creative ability does not translate to form at all. There is no, this world is thought forms. So we're dealing with thought forms every day, and what Jesus is saying, it is with your thoughts alone that we must work, he says. It is with your thoughts alone. He's not saying, oh, you got a financial problem, you have a sexual problem, you have a pollution problem going on, you have a messy house. Jesus is not saying all that, because those are just thought forms. And the problem is believing in the thought forms. You have to cease believing in thought forms. You see how deep it goes in that way. Because it's just, when you give faith to a thought form, you seem to bring a possibility into an existence. Not real existence, but just belief, fantasy. It's fantasy. We're back to that full circle, that this world is fantasy, it's fiction. And we can't escape from trying to go from one fantasy to the next. We cannot get out of fantasy by going to different forms. What Jesus is like, what the hell? Thought form to thought form. You really think you're going to make a real change by jumping from one unreal thought form to another thought form? And yet, have all of us who believe that we were bodies, sometimes we try the geographical solution. We're tired of a particular location. I got tired of Ohio. I mean, I know you guys all were meeting about Ohio, but I actually, I'm like, okay, Ohio. The Buckeye State, yeah. But eventually, you do hit the road, and you go beyond Ohio. You think, there's a whole world out here. Jesus is like, no, Ohio's just the thought form. Norwood, Dale and I, all these years, 10 years ago, and we go, he's like, I'm from Norwood. I went, huh, my parents met in Norwood. The church where I was baptized is baby Jesus, baby David. It was the sprinkling on that. It was in Norwood. And we're like, all these years later, we've been writing, it's like, you're from Norwood? That's where my family's from. Out of the whole universe, we find out. And originally, he's like, yeah, I'm in prison. And I said, well, I'm in prison too, but... And then we started to join on, it's the prison of the mind. And then I remember the one day you wrote me the letter, you were like, it's not Dale. I'm not in a physical prison. I'm in a mental prison. And then you didn't really care about your release date, and you were just going to put your full energy on releasing yourself from mental prison. And you did. And you still are. That's the point, we're going to try to set the mind free from these attack thoughts, from these judgments, from these grievances. It isn't that a great leap, It's not a physical prison. Mandela and Gandhi, of course, had the same realization. Yeah, once Gandhi realized that he wasn't actually in prison, in a physical prison, then he started exchanging vegetarian recipes and with the guards, and it's just same with you. You started to befriend your friends in there, the other ones, the guards. You started your ministry in there when you were really starting to light your mind up, with Jesus. You still communicate with them. Yeah. There's transformation going on. Yeah, that's it. People would say, "What? What are you talking about?" Yeah. Okay, here we go. We'll go back to pluribus to that quantum moment. There's spiritual awakening. It goes toward the light. The oneness is saying, "We've been you, but you've never been us." It's like Jesus talking about revelation. He says, revelation comes from God to you. Revelation doesn't go from you to God. Revelation, revealing, comes from God to you. You are in need of your identity being revealed to you. You don't reveal anything to God. God reveals everything to you. It moves in one direction. And in here, she's basically being told, we've been you, but you haven't been us. And that's why join us. It's like, come, be who you truly are, be one. It's a one-way direction. It's not reciprocal. I mean, you can see then Carol goes into Freedom Falls, and she's like, as a 16-year-old, she's starting to have her puberty, her awakening, and she seems to discover that she's gay. And her mother's like, I'll send you to counselors, to conversion therapy. Like, no, our daughter is not gay. We don't want a gay doctor. We'll send you to a camp where they will convert you from gay to heterosexual. But that's part of the ego's things. Even gay and heterosexual are part of the duality. What transcends homosexual and heterosexual? I am not a body. I am free. I am still as God created me. Spirit is saying, in that sense of evolution, we've been you. We've been tempted by the ego. That's what Jesus was tempted to believe in separation, but remembered the truth. Seemed to be a man who remembered the truth and then was called the Messiah because he remembered the oneness. Heaven is oneness. It's not a place, it's a state of mind. So you can see these kind of interactions are very helpful, because that's why we get into prayer, because the prayer is to have it be revealed, our true identity revealed, revelation. We're even changing one of the buildings here, like Revelation Hall, changing the name from superstructure to Revelation Hall, progressing. But it's you can see this is the distinction. So as soon as, she says, is this, do you know what the joining's about? If you learned, do you know what it is? And she says, we're learning more, Zosha says. And then Carol is saying, okay, here's a question for you. Is the process reversible? In other words, you who are one, can you become separate? Again, is the process reversible? And Zosha says, we can't answer questions like that. And then Carol is interpreting, your non-answer is an answer to me. And Carol's taking that answer, that non-answer, as it is reversible. She wants so much to be separate. It is reversible. And now we're going to see what she's going to attempt to do. It would be like having a conversation with Jesus and saying, is spiritual awakening reversible? And Jesus just smiling like, and then you trying to drug Jesus. That's about what we're going to Watch. So let's see what Carol's going to attempt here with social, because she didn't hear the answer and she thought your non-answer is an answer, meaning I think it's reversible. And now, if you don't mind, I'm going to drug you. Trying to drug Jesus. Get the truth out of it. Yeah, it's crazy. Okay. This is very interesting because we just went over the steps that oneness has said, we've been you, but you haven't been us. In other words, spiritual awakening moves in one direction. All things are always working together for good. All things are always part of an inevitable awakening. There is nothing that can prevent the awakening, the remembrance of God, because why? Because God is real and the world is not. So spiritual awakening goes in one direction, flawlessly, and we're always advancing, whether we're aware of it or not, we're always advancing back to remember the light. And Carol is so insistent that she's in her belief that the joining is reversible, that she's got truth serum going, like injecting in the elevator to get the answers of how it can be reversed, but it cannot be reversed. There is no going back to the ego because there is no ego there. There's only, everything is opening to God, to his movement toward the light. So this is a beautiful scene. And this also will play out practically because when you find yourself resisting spiritual awakening, sometimes you hear Jesus, sometimes you hear instructions of a step that you should take, and then your mind goes into resistance. The resistance is the belief that you can resist. It's like trying to resist the inevitable, and Jesus is whispering in your mind, please, 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 like like joining cannot be reversed. Spiritual awakening cannot be reversed. You can't really go backwards. You can believe you can, but you can't really do that. So you see how Carol's given her this truth serum and is saying, tell me, how is it reversed? And then finally all the one surrounds with all these chorus of, please, Carol. Yeah.
Related to resistance, what about delaying? The Course talks about wasting time or delaying. So how would that relate?
Well, there's the line, we just saw that in the movie last night, that time can waste or be wasted. He says time can waste or be wasted. But then what we start to realize is time was invented by the ego, because eternity is reality. So obviously time itself is an invention. But to the Holy Spirit, everything is neutral. It's the purpose for the words. It's the purpose for the time. It's the purpose that the Holy Spirit can use time to teach you that there is no time. The Holy Spirit, the purpose of relationship is ultimately to teach you the impossibility of interpersonal relationships, because why? There's no persons to be in the interpersonal relationship. Like our ascension through relationships. Hang the DJ, they try to playing it out and coach, and you have a perfect match, and then finally they were like, she threw the coach. Finally she was like, this is not, I don't believe it. I don't believe in a perfect match that way. And they said, we need to get out of here, time and space, and climb the wall. And then they go up, and then They can see that all of the attempts at interpersonal relationship were rebellions. 998 rebellions logged. And then the final one was like, no, we don't want to rebel against the truth, what is. So you have to begin to see that time is as neutral as any other concept that the ego invented. That time is just as neutral. And the real question is, what is time for? Do I want to give time to the Holy Spirit and say, here, there's another ego invention. You take it and you use it. It's on you now. I'm giving time back to you. I'm giving an invention back to you. Use time on behalf of the plan of awakening. And then Jesus is like, thank you. Oh, I'll give you a lot of miracles for that. A storehouse, that's the lesson for today. By opening the storehouse in your mind and giving them away. He's telling us in the workbook lesson today, there's a storehouse of miracles in there, and all he wants us to do is give away the storehouse. We have an infinite supply of miracles, and he's saying, give them away. And then see that when you receive it by giving it. That's how you know that you received, by giving. So that's what he would say, that's a good use of time. And again, time is a construct. So if you use time with Jesus, time disappears. If you use time with the ego, time can waste or be wasted because of the ego's purpose. The ego is using time to defend against eternity. And Jesus is saying, no, let's use it miraculously. And he says, when you give your mind over to miracles, you have time collapse. Miracles collapse time. Collapse time? Wow. Collapse time? Sounds like Jesus. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Cause and effect are together. He's teaching us right now is our gateway to eternity. This moment is it. I am the Alpha and the Omega. He's saying I am the beginning and the ending. It must be that the beginning and the ending are not separate. You see, he's completely, in one statement in the Bible, he's collapsing the belief in linear time. I am the Alpha and the Omega. Which is it? I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. There is no difference between the beginning and the end. And of course, I keep talking about this movie I showed, Doom of Love. Remember the movie Doom of Love I showed recently? There's only beginnings, and death is just a pessimistic view of beginnings. It's really cute, the Turkish, how they come up with this. I was like, ever since I saw that in the philosophy of the one and everything, in Japan, we're getting these beautiful symbols that there's only beginnings, which is really like it's always now, and now is always a beginning. We grow up with posters like that. Remember something like, today is the first day of the rest of your life. It's kind of another version of that. We like that feeling because it's focusing on the here and now. It's not focusing on the past. And all resistance is focusing on the past, which in the end is already gone. It's already been handled. It's already gone. Jesus uses the word gone. Yeah. So remember when they were on the airplane, and then where they all were having a meal together, the other ones, there's Lakshmi, the Indian woman, the mother, and she said, we all asked what it's like, meaning we all asked what it's like, the oneness is like, and you didn't. And yet you're telling us what we must do. She's just trying to say, we asked what it's like. And you didn't even ask. In other words, Carol was just spending every moment of every day fighting against the one, trying to reverse the oneness, looking to blame something of the oneness. And even there, Lakshmi was like, why do you keep doing this? It's like, why do you insist to hold on to this anger? Of course, Lakshmi herself has some of the anger too. She's one of the ones that aren't of the one. And the one they don't believe in punishment, they don't show anger. And even when Carol handcuffed herself to Zosha, tried to give her truth serum to get the reversal process out of her, they come up, she's dying, can we save her? Yes. And then, excuse us, as they cut, they say excuse us before they cut the handcuffs off. You can see there's not any anger, there's not any animosity. And that's kind of an extreme demonstration of Jesus saying, blessed are the meek, for the meek shall inherit the earth. In the Bible, Jesus says, blessed are the meek shall inherit the earth. Then he goes into the Course and he explains it. He says, the meek shall inherit the earth because they shall literally overcome it with their strength. In other words, with the strength of their mind, with the strength of the light in their mind, with the strength of their innocence, they will overcome the perception of a world that seems to be external. Blessed are the meek, for they shall overcome the world. And so we can see the meekness coming through so much. And then Carol is our example of, she's just like a bucking bronco. She's just like, even with the grenade, after everything's burning, she still has that blame, that anger and blame. She said, you gave me a, she doesn't even finish the sentence, you gave me a, like, you're to blame. You gave me a live hand grenade, and she's not seeing that she asked for it. You see how blame works. Like, everything's, the car's in flame, the whole house is in flames, everything's in flame, and she's like, you gave me, because it's still the anger, like, you did it to me. I am a victim of you. I am a victim of external circumstances. Some of you know my friend Frances Zhu, she, I went down a number of times, 7 straight years I went to Australia, but at some point she got deeper and deeper into spiritual awakening, and she had already left one country. She left China behind, then she left Australia behind, she left two countries behind. She divorced the husband, she sold her business, she sold 2 houses that they shared, and she took all these steps that were guided as she's going more into devotion to the one and letting go of the self-concept. They were all beautiful guided steps. She was letting go, and then I think Kirsten was talking, was it Kirsten the other day, about the priest who came. There wasn't just one priest. She had 3 priests that visited her, that were sent to her from her mother. And the first priest that came, she was so shocked that she was a bit thrown off by the whole thing. She was a bit shaken when she was interrogated by the first priest for studying a book of the devil, A Course in Miracles. And so she faced the first priest, and she was like shaken, because he was like, this is the work of the devil, you've lost your way, you've gone off, you've lost, this is not Jesus, you've lost your way. But then her mother persisted, and then sent a second priest to tell her that she had lost her way completely, and she was studying the work of the devil. And then her mother did not stop. That's what Kirsten was relaying, that her mother said, meet me in San Francisco, I think it was, and at a hotel, and let's spend a little time. I'll fly over from China, you can fly from Utah, meet me there. And she goes there, and she's already been visited by 2 priests that have told her that she's gone the wrong way, it's the work of the devil. And then she goes into the shower to take a shower. when she comes out of the shower, she still has a towel wrapped around her. And there's her mother, who she was staying there with, and her ex-husband, and a priest. 3 priests. But this was not just a regular priest. This was a cult deprogramming priest who had studied A Course in Miracles for years and was specialized. So the ego's like, "Ooh, get you." A specialized priest who had been in the Course, had escaped A Course in Miracles, and had become a Course in Miracles deprogramming priest, exorcist. One time, Francis and I were visiting Judy Scutch. Judy Scutch, one of the original 4, and we told Judy, and as we were having dinner, and Judy said, you need to write a book about these 3 priests, because Judy had seen a few things herself, being, one of the first ones into the Course, and all kinds of things had come to her. But in the end, when you start to take your unwinding, when you start to unwind from the world, you will receive guidance. And that guidance can seem at many times to be leaving things behind. And because remember, I was saying that the thoughts and the images are the same. And if your goal is to hand all of these unreal private thoughts over to the Holy Spirit so that they're taken away and they disappear, that's the way spiritual awakening works. You have to empty your mind. There are no external forces forcing you to do anything. It's all your own decision. That's what they're all circling around saying, please, Carol, please, please, please stop believing that you're being a victim of the one. Please stop trying to reverse joining, because joining is not reversible. Joining is inevitable. Please don't try to reverse what cannot be reversed. And this is so beautiful, because as you start to go deeper, you are called, people say, well, Jesus just wants you to love everybody. And he's not telling you to leave anybody or leave the world behind. And that's all that I grew up. I remember the thing about Christianity that I remembered the most it was Jesus saying, I am calling you out of the world. That seems pretty literal to me. I'm thinking he's a being of light, and he's teaching us that our kingdom is not of this world, is not of these images, is not of time and space. I'm calling you out of the world. I was taking that literally. And to me, that's where you have to begin to start to let go of the belief that you have a self-concept that is your identity, and that you can control the world and control your identity. How can we control an identity in this world when God didn't create this world? You start to put it all together, like, oh my gosh. And he does warn that the ego has tricks. Like, there's one workbook lesson we did recently where Jesus said, many have tried to renounce the world while still believing in it. That's an interesting line. Many have tried to renounce the world and then you think of like the East in India, there's called the path of renunciation, where sometimes Jesus, even back in his time, would say people paint their faces and do all these external prayers, almost like, look at me, how I'm renouncing the world. I'm praying by the Wailing Wall every day for 10 hours, almost like building a resume to prove how sacred and holy one is. And then what Jesus would say is, when you pray, go to your closet. It says in the Bible, when you pray, go to your closet and shut the door. You see how different that is than trying to make a public display of devotion to God. He's not interested. He wants us to go into deep prayer and meditation. Go to your closet and shut the door. He's like saying, no, it's simple. Come inside. I'm in here. I'm within you, where the kingdom of heaven is. We're within. We're not. You don't have to do a display to prove to the world. And I think also that's seen I know a number of you have had scenes like that we just saw with Carol, where Carol's trying to get Zosha to tell how the process can be reversed, and it can't. And, sometimes you have families or loved ones. I know Danny's probably had this conversation where you're trying to talk about how important this is, and it's like, no, it's not important. I mean, that's what happened with Frances. She divorces her husband. She tells her mother, I'm going for God and this and this. And then her husband and ex-husband and her mother came to her and they said, I thought you were following Jesus. And she said, yes, I am following Jesus. And isn't Jesus love? She said, yes, Jesus is love. Then they said to her, then love us, which interpreted as be with us. And she said, I'm trying to follow Jesus to love everyone and love everyone equally. But they were just saying, but love us then. Jesus is love. Jesus doesn't want you to leave anything behind. It's like, actually, if you really get into the depths of Jesus is saying, leave illusions behind. Do not hold on to configurations of images, thought forms that you've made that you identify with. Seek first the kingdom of heaven. So you really start to see here is all the people were gathered around her, and they finally were all like, Carol, Carol, Carol. Like you have to give way eventually to the oneness. You can't expect the oneness to turn itself back into separation. It just doesn't go that direction. This is an evolving and an awakening into oneness. It's not, how do I bring the oneness into the world of fragments and images? How can I bring God into my living room? And Jesus is like, bring the concept of your living room to God and watch it disappear. Don't believe you can bring God, eternal life, into some image, whatever that image may be. It doesn't work that way. You have to bring the darkness to the light. You cannot bring the light into the darkness. And this is clearly what Carol is trying to do. With every moment that she has, she's going to fight and fight and fight to say it has to go back to the way the world was. That there's something not right, and it's like she wants the fragmented world that she saw before, and she wants the light, the oneness to come back and turn back the clock to the way it was. So it's really good stuff. It's like showing us the fundamental movement of spiritual awakening. We have to go in that direction. We can fight it, we can delay, but we cannot stop it. God is, and Jesus says, we say God is and we cease to speak. Those are like the final two words that you need. God is. Okay, here we go. If you don't want help from the one, then the one won't force help on you. It may seem that symbols start to fall away and drop away, and if the stance of the mind is, I want the past just the way that it was, that is not the direction of spiritual awakening. So she's like, after she tried to drug Zosha, her angel, her mighty companion, she tries to drug her mighty companion. And that's just like saying no to the one. No, I don't want to wake up. I had a friend of mine who was following the course for years and years and years, and then her family, her daughter was like saying, no, you're trying to go for union with God. I don't want that. I want to be a mother. I want to have a family. It was literally verbalized. No, I'm not wanting to go in that direction. Good, you can if you want to, but no. And in the end, Jesus is telling us, we look upon the world, and the world is just symbolic. The world is a pictorial representation of our thoughts. And if our mind is saying, my heart of heart and my desire, I desire to be something other than the way God created me, then the world will, of course, be a pictorial representation of that. If that's the prayer, that's the prayer, that's the desire of the heart. It comes down to the core, to the altar, to the desire. What do you want? As there's a workbook lesson in the Course where Jesus says, to say the words, I want the peace of God, is nothing, but to mean the words, I want the peace of God, is everything. He makes a distinction between saying the words and meaning it. And in the end, that's why the spiritual journey is about meaning it, like really desiring peace above all else, having that be the top priority. And we could say the only priority in the end, because what else is there? This is a course in inner peace. Let's be honest, that's what it is. The goals of this course are very different from the goals of the world. We have to be honest about that, We have to be honest with ourselves. So we see Carol here now. She's resistant. She lays down to take a nap, and then she wakes up and the hospital's empty, and now she goes onto the roof and she can see the cars exiting, as a representation of her non-invitation to the One. That is a pictorial representation of the non-invitation to the One. Is she being abandoned? No. Her invitation is not there. She is not inviting the light. She is not inviting the One. She is not inviting Jesus. It's just trying to every day pick apart, blame, give her anger, her suspicion, even though she's gotten angry. And the first time she got angry, I think it was, 3 million people died? And then it was the next time she got angry when she was meeting with him, it was 11 million. And, that's why sometimes she wants to throw up, because it's this guilt about, what? My thoughts, my anger produced a perception of 3 million, then 11 million people dying, that's a lot. Then it's like the mind wants to go back to, those are just idle thoughts. Like, she still was angry at Zosha, even though everything was burning. She said, she didn't finish the sentence, a grenade. Like you did it to me. You gave me a grenade. Like, I am the victim of you giving me a grenade, but she actually asked for it. She actually asked for, give me a grenade. And it was given to her. So Jesus is teaching us, especially like in lesson 152, the power of decision is my own, that everything that we perceive in the world is there down to the detail because of our own election or our own decision. That, he says, you may believe this is too extreme to be the truth, but truth has no exceptions. He's just trying to show us the power of our mind, and that every circumstance, every situation, everything that we perceive in the world down to the last detail is in place because of our own election, our own decision. And that decision is based on, guess what? The ego, the belief in separation from God. So when we go deep into our belief system, he says to learn this course requires willingness to question every value that you hold. Not one can be kept hidden, or it will obscure your learning. He's just saying you need to be completely thorough in this inquiry, in this investigation into the mind. And now it becomes apparent why you need to have devotion, because this is like a complete undoing and a clearing away of egoic thoughts. I guess in plumbing terms, it's getting the roto-rooter. You gotta, when they come and they drill down into your clogged sink that's got all the gunk, you've gotta go down there. In dental terms, what is this? This is a mental root canal. This is a mental root canal. Let's not kid ourselves. We're asking for a mental root canal from the Holy Spirit. And what is the root? The ego. Is it diseased? Yes. Is it infested? Yes. Yeah. Does our mind need to have that root canal to be free, to know its cleanliness, its holiness, its purity, its innocence? Yes, yes, yes. So this is a good scene. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had experiences in my life where I just pray and pray and pray and pray, and then everybody seems to go. I mean, I've had times in my life where I've just prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed, and I look around and this is the scene. Is mom there? No. Is dad there? No. Are the friends there? No. It looks like an evacuation. And instead of thinking, what have I done wrong? Jesus is saying, thank you for praying for the answer. Because the answer is not people dependent. What if it's a dream, what matters it, what the configuration looks like? In the end, he's telling us, have emotional honesty. Say, how do you feel? If you're feeling frustrated, change your mind. If you're feeling afraid, change your mind. If you're feeling abandoned, change your mind. It's like, isn't that beautiful? That he's so true with us, like always telling us, if you've made a wrong decision, then decide again. Just change your mind. It's such a beautiful, loving, harmonious answer to us. Change your mind. Just change your mind. You have a very powerful mind. If there's something you don't like, if there's something you're frustrated with or disgusted with, then simply change your mind. Viktor Frankl, some of you might have read that book, Man's Search for Meaning, when he's in the concentration camps. That's what he discovered when he was in a concentration camp. The only solution he could find was change your mind. That's the only thing that worked in a concentration camp. Nothing else would work. And Jesus is like saying, yeah, that's it. You got to do what Victor did. You have to actually change your mind. And you can see with Carol's like, she hasn't even reached the no. She's just no. She's in the no. And now the symbols of help are gone, which is a good step for her, because now she has to really look again at her mind because they left. They're gone. So it's a beautiful phase in this movie that the one is not going to hunt and search, and it's not going to go on a search and destroy mission. You have to invite it, to experience the blessings of it, the benefit of it. But the one's not going to pursue you. That's the ego, I said the other night. The ego will pursue you beyond the grave. That's the Freddy Krueger. The oneness is not going to go on a search and destroy mission or search and find. You have to invite it. So there you see, it's so great. He's not yet the one, so he's into fantasy land still, but he's loving the manifestation stuff. He's like, yeah, I've got a powerful mind. I'm going to use it. I've got to go for get all the good stuff before, and then all of a sudden, but the one is purpose, and because the one is not welcome by Carol, and Carol is coming to visit him, the one is clearing out, because the one is not invited. You see, how the one, all of those women, and even the housekeeper, she's got her dress down, and she's like waving goodbye, because they're all under control of the one, of the spirit, and the one is not invited by Carol, and Carol's coming to visit, so that we have to leave. He's like, what? Why? But purpose is the only choice. You see, purpose, the purpose in the one is only for awakening. There is love, it's joy, it's peace, it's happiness. There's no other mixing it with anything else. So meanwhile, they're giving him what he desires, and then they're acting out that, but also they're in a point of they're under the control of the one. They're under the purpose of the one, and here is a perfect example where, Carol is not invited the one, and so not only did they clear out where she was, but they're clearing out before she comes for a visit too, because there's no invitation. Isn't that great how powerful our mind is? What we invite, we experience, and what we deny and push away, we do not experience. We can deny God's love, but we can't ever ultimately block it out, because it's destiny that we are that love. And we are moving in the direction of that. And we can't reverse the direction of that, no matter how much we try. Jesus uses the exact same word in A Course in Miracles, consent. He says that everything you perceive is the result of your own decision, and your decision is based on what you want. Everything is the result of your own decision. He even says in that workbook lesson, my capital self is ruler of the universe, that it is impossible that anything should come to me unbidden by myself. Even in this world, it is I that rule my destiny. What happens is what I desire, and what does not occur is what I do not want to happen. So everything that we experience is because of a decision in our mind. Everything, without exception. That's why we're not the victim of the world. We're deciding upon it. We're deciding about it. Of course, if we have unconscious beliefs in the ego, then some of our decisions are reflecting the death wish and the desire to be separate from God that's still in force until we decide again. But heaven is the decision I must make. That's a workbook lesson. Heaven is the decision I must make. So we always have the option, but at one point Jesus uses the very same word that Carol is using in that Kumbha just told her, consent. They can't do anything to you without your own consent. And Jesus says, no one dies without his own consent. He says in the Course, no one dies without his own consent. He does encourage us not to die. He says, swear not to die, you holy Son of God. You make a bargain you cannot keep. So it's not like he's encouraging us to die. He's saying, God didn't invent death. The ego is death. And when you choose the ego, you're choosing to be dead to your true Christ self, your reality. But no one dies without their own consent. He uses the same word that Carol is using. So, earlier on, when she was listening very carefully to what the one was telling her, they used the term agency. You have agency. And she's like, I have agency. She even tried to drug her companion, mighty companion, Sosha, because she says, I have agency. It's like I have a will apart from God, and I'm going to hold on and maintain that will apart, which Jesus is telling us that's death, to believe you have a will apart from the Creator. God gave you free will in your creation, and when you decide against that, you have agency or something else, then you have to decide again. So I think it's really good, because that's so good that they're showing us this in pluribus, and 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 everyone always has a choice, so there's no coercion. It's not like God is trying to coerce us back into heaven, and Jesus is even saying, I can advise you on the conditions in which you set up separation, but I cannot intervene for you. In other words, he's saying, you can be like me, or you can choose to not be like me, the Christ. And I cannot intervene between your thoughts and their effects. In other words, you have to choose the atonement. You have to choose to be as God created you. You have to choose it. I can't intervene. I'm not an intervention for you. And he does give us a lot of instruction, and he's showing us you don't want to make that choice for the ego. He's really laying it out. 31 chapters, 365 lessons. He's saying you don't want to choose death. You don't want to try to choose your own identity. You are as God created you. You are spirit forever. Nothing can change that. But it's your choice. You can choose to listen to me or not. Isn't that beautiful? Where's the coercion in that? You can't blame Jesus. Say, you're trying to coerce me into leaving my family, leaving my world behind. You're trying to coerce me. And Jesus is like, no, you can choose, or you can choose not, but I will wait. And then he says, and probably the most powerful lines in the whole course, I stand at the door. And while I'm here, the door cannot be shut. And I live forever. It's so powerful. I'm at the door. I'm at the door waiting for you. You have to decide. While I stand here at the door cannot be shut. And I live forever. It's so powerful. Yeah, it's like, that's it. It gets me every time. I mean, when I read that part, it's like it takes your breath away. And I live forever. Just one last word. Who gets the last word in? And I live forever. In other words, salvation is guaranteed for you. There's a workbook lesson where he says the same line 7 different times in the one workbook lesson. Because I was at a conference one time, a course conference, and a friend of mine from St. Louis said, I read a lesson, and he kept repeating the same line 7 different times in the lesson. And I said, yeah, I know that. He said, what's the line? I said, the line is, your sinlessness is guaranteed by God. 7 times. Isn't that a beautiful line? You think he's making a point? 7 times in one lesson, your sinlessness is guaranteed by God. He's like saying, you're innocent, you're innocent, you're innocent, you're innocent. No matter what you believe, you are still innocent because God created you that way, and you can't change. God is not changing God's mind. You need to accept the gift. That's a return. What's that great Enigma song? Return to Innocence. Yeah, where everything goes backwards, like in Mr. Nobody. The whole video is everything goes backwards. Thank God. That's our show for tonight. Soft ending. Will it hurt? No, we would never hurt you. No stem cells, no shot in the hip. Just a happy little lamb galloping around. Very sweet. Yeah. So that's it. That's why we pray for the yes in our mind. Yeah. Just for the soft merge into what always is and always was and always will be. No big ceremony. Just completely inform, ordinary. Yeah. Just a merge. Just a remembrance. Yeah. So, I guess Danny's got the roving mic. And here we go. We've got to start.
Yeah, I want to be sure to report this because I kind of came here tonight with even a stronger sense of there must be something I can do to joining more, And I know there's so much fog, and and I'm not going to get frustrated and disappointed, and I'm not going to do that. But maybe I've been too patient, waiting. I don't know. But anyway, so right before the hand grenade scene, I started to notice looking at you was just transforming. It was just something was really getting shifted. And like you're saying right now, it's so quiet and natural, but a big thing has happened there, because it's always been a puzzle. I wasn't aware of fear particularly. I've had so many spiritual teachers, I could go on and on trying to make some context, but then when you finally said he waits at the door he's waiting for you to invite him in, it's like, well, there's the words right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
invitation.
Yeah, maybe that's all to be said. All there was to be said. Yeah. But of course it makes everything here bigger and more connected. The retreat, all the people, everything just, so.
Yeah.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, I get shivers when I read that passage.
Yeah.
Just,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, that's it.
Thank you. I think we can wrap it up for tonight. Thank you all for coming. Yeah, very sweet.